It's the end of the year. You're trying to set up your planning system for next year. Maybe you've got 3 different planners in your cart. Maybe you're watching setup videos at 2 a.m. Maybe you're convinced that this year you'll finally find that single perfect system. But the truth is this: that pressure to find the perfect unchanging planner is setting you up to feel like you failed when life inevitably shifts and your needs evolve. Because they will. Your projects will shift, your energy will fluctuate, and the system that worked in January might feel suffocating by July. I know this because I switched between 5 different planners this year. 5 different planners. And this was all after being so sure that the planner I chose at the beginning of the year was the one for me. But this failure taught me something crucial. The best planning systems always give you permission to change. So today, I'm walking you through my entire 2025 planner journey and showing you how to set up specific guardrails for your next year of planning so you can stop panic buying and start planning with confidence. So I'm making this video at the end of the year because I think the new year is a really, really fun time in planner world. People have bought all their new planners, we're still scouring the web for that perfect fit. We're really excited about change. We have a lot of ideas for the new year. We're really excited about getting into those. And it's a really fun time. It's just a really fun time. It's fun to imagine the future versions of ourselves that we could be. And we do that and express that through the tools that we buy. So if you're starting this video and you're like, Rachel, don't tell me not to buy cool planners. I'm definitely not going to do that. For me, though, I tend to need some guardrails going into the new year, or I will essentially try to change too much. I will try to change beyond what is reasonable. And I think this is because planning for the new year tends to be our excuse to swing for a big reset. We're sick and tired of our old systems, and we just want to wipe it all away and start afresh. But we often forget to temper our expectations for ourselves. So we have those dreams for what we could be in the future, and we tend to set up those big, grand systems to support those dreams without actually making plans to manage new systems or creatively imagine how those systems will actually affect those plans that we have. So my first tip, if you are approaching the new year and feeling some of this planner anxiety, feeling yourself start to set up a system you're maybe not ready for, or swing really big from one planner to a completely different planner or system, my first tip is to wait until February. You don't have to wait until February to start actually using the planners, of course, but wait until February to see if what you have set up is actually working for you. January is not a real month, okay? January is just a trial period where you test the expectations you set and see if it actually works for you. I fully plan to use this coming January as a trial period for my own planners, and I will be documenting what works and what doesn't work over on my newsletter, so hit the link below or scan the QR code on the screen to see how I do this for myself. But the point is, January is a month that you gather evidence to set up the rest of your year for success, and you don't put expectations on yourself to nail your system down perfectly. So let me lay out what was going on for me at the beginning of the year. In fall 2024, I was spending some time in an undated common planner. So the weekly layouts look like this. They're not dated at all. Monthly's looking like this. Very undated, very unstructured. And I found that I had too much blank space and no dated structure. And then that was a problem for me. So because this was too free, too loosey-goosey, too could be anything I wanted it to be, I was lacking a sense of structure. And so I moved into the manager's notebook, which is a paper test designs notebook. I moved into the manager's notebook as an attempt to give myself some more structure. But here's the problem with the manager's notebook. At least for me, manager's notebook is a great planner. I'm sure it works for some people. It didn't work for me. And here's why. It's because it was a completely different type of planner than I had ever used. There was a strong emphasis on monthly layouts. Let me show you the 2 monthlies. So this is one monthly where it has the month days right here. It has smaller sections down here where you can write, a focus section over here where you can write something in this column, something in this column. And then it also has this monthly sort of project tracker / dashboard, which again is very specific. There is a wheel here. There's a progress tracker. There's goals. There's a list. There's habits. There's this habit tracker / marker thing in the middle. There's also a weekly layout, and then there's no daily layout, but each week has a blank page separating them. So you can see that
there is a strong emphasis on monthlies, and each page, each layout is broken down into hyper-specific sections that don't have room for flexibility. Plus, I had never been good at monthly planning, so I don't know why I thought that going into a planner with 2 different monthly spreads was actually gonna work for me. But I was going from an undated planner, all this loose open space, open structure that had left me feeling really scattered, into something that had a lot of structure because I was making that big swing from unstructured to structured. And so this structure looked to me at first like a comfort, but you can see how it's not really a solution to the feelings that I was having of like needing a little bit more structure. It's actually just a really big swing in the other direction, a sort of a mad grab for something that felt a little more structured than a blank notebook. And now this wouldn't be a problem. Like you can and should experiment between your planners. And if you spend a lot of time in an unstructured book, try a really structured book. Use these as opportunities to experiment with yourself. I don't resent myself for trying that. But what the problem was is that I had expectations of myself and of this planner that it would be perfect for me and the things I was going through in life. I mean, I literally thought because it said manager's notebook that it meant it would solve all the problems I was experiencing as a manager. But not all managers' problems are the same, obviously. So there was no good reason for me to go into this with the expectation that it would be perfect or work fantastic for me. I just gave myself this expectation pretty unfairly at the start of the year. So February and March were really difficult for me because I kept switching back and forth between the manager's notebook and the undated common planner, which still had a lot of space in the back. Pretty much all of this is like the beginning of the year with still some, I didn't even finish it in the back. So I was flip-flopping between intense structure and no structure. But big swings incur big misses. Like I said, this doesn't mean you should never take a big swing. We never grow if we don't take big swings. But when we are swinging wide, make sure you give yourself permission to fall short. Shoot for the moon, end up among the stars, whatever the expression is. And to do this in a way that doesn't make you go insane, I recommend giving yourself the deadline of February to really decide if the system you set up for yourself in the new year is actually going to work. It might not, and that is okay. But we're doing this January experiment in order to break down our brain's expectations of ourselves so that we are more compassionate when we end up deciding something doesn't work for us. We won't see it as much of a failure as if we set all these expectations on ourselves. We're not tying our identities up in new planners. We are basically just taking January as an experimental month. So here is your mission. Go into the new year with no expectations. Try the fancy system and planners you had set up for yourself all month, and then journal longhand through your experience, honestly reflecting on what parts felt good or bad or why. Then you can make decisions going forward, having evaluated what just happened, and you will feel so much better, giving yourself a chance to grow rather than setting all these expectations on yourself. It really sets the tone for everything that's coming up throughout the year, which, you guessed it, is just going to be more change.
I want to jump in here and talk about today's sponsor, AccuFlow, and specifically how it's helped me stop wasting mental energy on decision fatigue. Every time I open my laptop, I'm making dozens of micro decisions. Do I check my email first or Slack? Should I look at my calendar or my to-do list? I spend half my workday determining which work I should be focused on and when, but this was before AccuFlow. AccuFlow helps professionals organize their schedules by creating one unified workspace where everything lives. Your calendar, your tasks from Gmail and Slack, your project deadlines, it all shows up in one place. So instead of deciding where to look, you just look at AccuFlow and see everything. Here's what really sold me. Their AI learns your habits and auto-assigns tasks to save time and improve productivity. So when a new task comes in, Aki, their AI assistant, can suggest when to do it based on your patterns. It's like having someone who actually knows how you work helping to plan your day. With seamless connections to Gmail, Slack, Todoist, Notion, and more, AccuFlow consolidates tasks from multiple platforms into that one universal inbox I mentioned. No more tab switching, no more wondering if you're missing something. And if you're keyboard shortcut obsessed like me, their command bar is incredible. You can add tasks, reschedule meetings, start focus timers, all without ever touching your mouse. Try AccuFlow for free for 7 days using my link below. Plus, they offer a free one-on-one onboarding call to make sure you're set up in a way that actually makes sense for your workflow. Thanks again to AccuFlow for sponsoring. Now let's get back to the video.
If I had actually had a more compassionate and experimental view on my planning in the beginning of the year, I probably would not have made the mistakes I made in quarter two, which essentially just threw me into chaos. So after flailing, I reached for a bunch of different books. I bought Hobonichi Cousin and worked on daily planning and daily notes. I also created a drop and find system in the weeklies. Yes, drop and find system. I also spun up a life admin book to try to organize my tasks en masse in here with the Traveler's Notebook system. I bought several blank notebooks with the intention to use them on something impactful, and I purchased a Nulty planner that I frankly have no idea why I purchased, and then I used it for like one day. Plus, I also still had the expectation of myself that I was going to use this, and I was falling back on this as a backup option. So I was using a bunch of stuff in like quarter two, April, May, June. And my life at this point had also become a mess. I started out the year having a thriving YouTube channel, a successful full-time job, a relationship, a social life, personal projects and goals, and everything in between. And on the outside, I looked really successful. I looked really organized, really happy. But on the inside, I was flailing. And I knew part of the reason I was flailing was because I was experimenting with so much at one time. I didn't have a central place to go and to trust. But my next tip isn't to just experiment with one thing at a time. That's too obvious and it's too simple. You already know that you should be experimenting with one thing at a time, and I for sure know that experimenting with one thing at a time doesn't always work, even if it is the best advice. So instead of saying that you should just experiment with one thing at a time, my next tip is this. When you feel yourself start to get anxious and jump between planners and systems too frequently, again, all this was within the span of 3 months, you need to take a step back, take a breath, and then define what makes you feel calm. So when you think about your planning, what sounds like relief? Sure, having a perfect system all in one book may sound like relief, right? Or making sure you set up your planner in the right way and fill it out perfectly every single time, that might feel like relief. Sometimes even just buying a new product might sound like relief, but try to fill this out on an emotional sense rather than just sort of like an immediate relief, right? Think a little more Tom. Think a little more Tom. Think a little more calm and long term. What instantly clears your heart of all the weight it's feeling when you're stressed out and when you are too busy to maintain the complex systems you set up, or when the planner you find yourself loving at the beginning of the year is no longer working for you? What instantly clears your heart of all that weight? What vibe are you trying to create, and how can you achieve that? When we start finding ourselves making slapdash purchases, we're basically just setting ourselves up to buy a new planner, just like I did here. Buy a new planner and fail immediately. And then, of course, what do you want to do? You want to buy another planner and fail immediately. And again, buying and experimenting is not the issue, but you do want to get in touch with yourself and actually observe what feels like peace. So for me at this point in my life, what genuinely felt like peace was having one book that I could trust everything to hold. It also felt like peace to have some structure, specifically dated structure, but enough space that I could play around with it and do what felt right at the time rather than sticking to a rigid system. So using like a blank notebook was out. This doesn't have enough structure for me. I figured that out with the common planner that's undated, specifically the undated common planner, but also the manager's notebook and the life admin notebook were out because these systems were too strict for what I needed. They're great systems. I really did like the setup of the life admin book. Lots of you have told me that the life admin book was really helpful for you. I think it's a great framework and I'd love to get back to it. And also no shade on the manager's notebook. I'm sure it works for some people so well. But for me, this was just too much constraint, and I just needed enough structure to get by without putting too much expectation on myself. So these with too much constraint sort of left my purview. I was swinging for something good with the Nulty. Lots of space, right? Not a lot of restraint or structure here. I had a lot of space on the weekly layout, but I actually just simply needed more space. And that is what brought me to the Hobonichi Cousin. Eventually, I settled on the Cousin. It was big enough to house all my planning, beautiful, large daily spreads, plenty of space in the weeklies, plenty of space in the monthlies. But these layouts are also flexible enough that nothing really constrained me. These are dated pages, but any of the markings are pretty minimal. And because it had separate weeklies and separate dailies, I was not feeling the need to capture every single thing on a weekly layout or every single thing on a daily layout. And this really became that one place I could trust. If one of the things that makes you feel calm and at peace is knowing that your work and personal lives are completely separate, whatever makes you feel calm, let that feeling guide you, and then make your planner decisions either using what you have or buying something new. Make that around that feeling of calm, not that feeling of like, oh God, I gotta move and I gotta buy the right thing. My last tip for you is to figure out the main spreads that you actually need in your system and make sure you have those at all costs, okay? So for me, the structure of the cousin with all the space it allowed was really relieving. But I knew for sure I needed the daily and the weekly pages. Those were the two things that I really desperately needed because those would actually give me the structure I was craving with the space that I needed. And again, this is something I know from my personal data. From the various planners that I bought this year or various things that I reached for this year, I was reaching for stuff that was free form and stuff that was structured, but also the Undated Common Planner had a vertical weekly, right? Manager's Notebook also had a vertical weekly. Nulty, the dominant spread in the book, is a weekly, and I was reaching for all of this blank space for things like daily logging. So even in just the evidence of the things that I bought this year, notwithstanding all of the other planners I've ever had in my life, I knew the Hobonichi Cousin was going to work for me because I had those two things. I had the weekly and I had the daily, specifically a vertical weekly and a daily page. So try this exercise. Using the data you have about yourself, go back and look at your old planners. Or if you're using January as your experimental month, at the end of the month, go back into January and pull evidence from there and try to figure out what the top 3 spreads you consistently use are. And then make sure those are somewhere in your system. So it might be a weekly and a daily, like it is for me. I have 2 critical spreads. I don't really need a monthly. I don't really need a yearly. For me, I have 2 critical spreads, but I think most people probably have 3. Maybe that is a daily for you. Maybe for you, it's 1 monthly spread in a sort of a calendar format and 1 tracker spread that you really need, in addition to then a weekly. Whatever your spreads are, find those 3 critical spreads. And then when you buy a new planner, ask yourself if all of these spreads are represented. If not, why are they not represented? Why are you changing from the spreads you like to a new spread? Have a good why. Ideally, you'll still keep some kind of weekly spread if you're a weekly spread person, but you might get more granular. Do you like a vertical weekly, or do you like one of these weird weeklies that Nulty has, or do you like a horizontal weekly with a memo page like in the Hobonichi Weeks? Keep in mind those top 3 spreads and try to orient your purchasing decisions around those 3 spreads. It's so fine to step outside of those 3 spreads and step outside of those boxes, but when you feel anxious or when you feel like you need to buy something just to get rid of the bad feeling, come back to those 3 spreads. When we give ourselves permission to change throughout the year, but also have these guardrails around what we know works for us, we can both move freely and stay structured without the stress.
Your planner will probably change in the next year, and that doesn't mean you failed at planning. It means your system reflects your real life. So use those 3 spreads as your guardrails, give yourself permission to experiment, and remember that a system that evolves with you is way more valuable than one that looks perfect but feels like handcuffs. If you want to keep up with me as I change and tweak my systems, the best place to do that is over on my newsletter. Check it out at the link below or by scanning the QR code on the screen. And of course, none of this will matter if you don't know when to switch planners. So I will leave my guide to planner hopping right here on the screen next to my head. As always, thank you so much for watching, for being subscribed, for being awesome. I absolutely adore you, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.